Hello. In discussing the story of Purim, the Talmud makes a remarkable point. Quote, Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana said, when King Ahasuerus approved Haman's proposal to kill all the Jews, he was more effective than the 48 prophets and 7 prophetesses who prophesied on behalf of the Jewish people. Indeed, they were unable to return the Jewish people to the right way, but the king's agreement to genocide returned them to the right way. Unquote. So, Haman did more for the Jews spiritually than all the prophets in the Bible. The prophets told the Jews to repent and reform, and the Jews didn't listen. But Ahasuerus ordered all the Jews killed, and all of a sudden, the Jews went back to their traditions. The message is clear. Antisemitism can preserve Judaism. It can do so in one of two ways. The religious might say, anti-Semites are harming me because I sinned, so I will sin no more and become more observant. The secular might say, so, these guys don't like Jews, eh? I'll show them by being even more Jewishly committed. Tractate Makot in the Talmud makes the point even more strongly. Quote, Rav said, I'm afraid of this verse in the Torah, in which God says, if you do not follow my commandments, you shall perish among the nations, and the land of your enemies shall consume you. Mar Zutra comments, perhaps it means like the consumption of cucumbers and gourds, which are not entirely consumed, and what is left can grow into new plants. Unquote. The Maharsha from 16th century Poland explains, when a cucumber falls to the ground, it rots. Yet the very ground which causes it to rot is what allows it to take root and grow and be reborn. So it is with Israel in exile. Although many Jews will die, the hostile environment of persecution will itself cause them to experience a spiritual rebirth. Unquote. Even in the Torah, God makes the following prediction to Abraham. Know for certain that your offspring will be strangers in a strange land and will be enslaved and afflicted for 400 years. But know with equal certainty that I will judge the nation that enslaves them, and that afterwards they will leave with great substance. Unquote. This is not punishment for anything. Evidently, God thought slavery was necessary, possibly to build up our identity and community spirit under the malevolent protection of a superpower. We were all in the same boat, followed the same customs, and huddled together to face our oppressors. Here's more historical evidence. After the Exodus, a lot of Jews lapsed into idolatry and clung to it tenaciously and enthusiastically for 1,000 years. The Talmud says that Rav Ashi dreamed of King Menashe, the most wicked king who championed idolatry, and asked him, if you're so wise, why did you worship idols? King Menashe replied, if you had lived in my time, you would have done the same. You would have lifted the hems of your robes to run behind me to worship idols also. Unquote. Then after the exile in Babylon, idolatry disappeared from Judaism, suddenly and completely, and has remained absent for the next 2,500 years, to this day. What happened? Here's my own explanation. During the 1,000 years of idolatry, the Jews were essentially free and masters of their own house. They felt they could indulge in whatever appealed to them, as free people do. Many found idolatrous rites colorful and attractive and felt free to engage in them. But for the next 2,500 years, the Jews were subjugated and persecuted by the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Christians, the Muslims, etc. They felt they had to keep their own traditions and not adopt the practices of their overlords as an act of rebellion. They were even willing to die rather than be forced to indulge in idolatry or reject their traditions. The story of Hanukkah is a perfect example. Here we have the historical evidence that anti-Semitism preserved Judaism. If you could remove anti-Judaism, would you be removing Judaism as well? Is it true that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger? This point has been made repeatedly in modern times also. Here are some examples. Spinoza, in 17th century Holland, said, "Only thanks to anti-Semitism do the Jews continue to exist as a separate people." Rabbi Hirsch, in 19th century Germany, said that anti-Semitism is the tool through which the God of Israel preserves his people. In the Torah, we read about the first instance of anti-Semitism, how Isaac lived peacefully among his neighbors, then through hard and honest work became fabulously wealthy and powerful. So his neighbors envied him, hated him, then harmed him by depriving him of water, the very source of life, and finally expelled him. Here's the account in the Torah. Quote, "Then Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. And the Lord blessed him. And the man became rich, and gained more and more, until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks, and possessions of herds, and large numbers of servants. And the Philistines envied him. And the Philistines stopped up all his wells, and filled them with earth. And Abimelech, king of the Philistines, said to Isaac, 'Go away from us, because you are much mightier than we are.' And Isaac departed from there, and encamped in the valley of Gerar, and dwelt there." Unquote. Rabbi Hirsch adds, "Had it not been for that jealousy, Isaac would have slid into a life of leisure and forgotten all about his divine mission. Jealousy is, quote, one of the great vehicles of salvation. It warns the Jews again and again against assimilation." Bet HaLevi, in 19th century Russia, notes that when Jacob was about to meet with his brother Esau, after decades of estrangement and enmity, he prayed, "Hatzilenu na miyad achi, miyad Esav." "Save me, I beseech you, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau." Bet HaLevi asked himself, why the repetition, "from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau"? We know Jacob's brother is Esau. And he answered, "We are threatened by two kinds of dangers from the nations of the world. The physical threat of hatred, expressed as crusade, pogrom, and holocaust, and the spiritual threat of the welcoming arms of acceptance, which turns into the asphyxiating embrace of assimilation. These two dangers are expressed in Jacob's prayer here. Save me from my brother" refers to when he behaves with friendship and brotherhood. And from Esau refers to when he reveals he is a Jew hater seeking a final solution. Of the two threats, history has shown that the spiritual danger of assimilation is more formidable than the physical peril of annihilation. And for this reason, Jacob first prays to overcome the threat of his brother, then prays to overcome the threat of Esau. Unquote. Herzl, in 1896, was totally secular and assimilated, but the Dreyfus trial in France convinced him that anti-Semitism will not disappear with assimilation. He concluded we need a Jewish state and founded Zionism, leading to the State of Israel. That state was founded by secular Jews. They would have been totally assimilated and not bothered to even think of a Jewish state if they had been allowed to forget they were Jews. Freud said in 1926, "My language is German. My culture, my attainments are German. I considered myself German intellectually, until I noticed the growth of anti-Semitic prejudice in Germany and German Austria. Since that time, I prefer to call myself a Jew." Sartre noted in 1948 that assimilated Jews are not preserved by their faith or their common past, but by, quote, "the Christian who suddenly halts the Jew's process of assimilation and creates a special role for him," unquote. Einstein wrote in 1952, "My relationship to the Jewish people has become my strongest human bond. Ever since I became fully aware of our precarious situation among the nations of the world." Nahum Goldman, Zionist leader and former head of the World Jewish Congress, said, quote, "Anti-Semitism is good for Judaism, but bad for the Jews. lack of anti-Semitism is good for the Jews, but bad for Judaism. Jonathan Tobin wrote an article in 2013 called "Loving Us to Death: How America's Embrace is Imperiling American Jewry," in which he said, quote, "The recent Pew study shows that there has been a startling increase over the past quarter century of Jews who say they have no religion. Intermarriage rates in that group are now at 70%, and only 47% give their children a Jewish education. Jews are not being driven from Judaism due to social difficulties. Fewer than 20% claim to have experienced even a snub in a social setting, let alone an anti-Semitic epithet in the past year. Such numbers are not only without precedent in American history, they are without precedent in the millennia-long history of the Jewish people. It is now inarguable that American Jewry is rapidly shrinking, and the democratic trend lines are stark. American Jews is on the brink of a demographic catastrophe. And yet here's the paradox. This catastrophe is also a triumph both for American Jews and for the American experiment." Unquote. Alan Dershowitz, Harvard professor, in his 2017 book The Vanishing Jew, said that the absence of anti-Semitism in the US spells doom for American Jews. "The good times we experience may mark the beginning of the end of Jewish life in America as we know it. Now that most Jews are free, not constrained in their spiritual choices, and not decisively held back by anti-Semitism, especially in the West, many are abandoning Judaism." Now, we must balance this by the observation that it doesn't always work. Many Jews have said, if such vicious persecution is the price for staying Jewish, it's too high for me. Here are 3 examples. When the Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492, only 1/3 refused to convert to Christianity and left, among them my own ancestors. Another third converted, and the last third had already converted. Romantic stories abound about the Marranos who practiced Judaism in secret while pretending to be Christians, but the reality is that this was at best a one-generation affair. The next generation were simply Christians, and the overwhelming majority had no intention of changing. It has been said that half of Spain today has some Jewish blood. In the 19th century, a tidal wave of conversion and assimilation swept European Jewry. Conversion was the ticket to acceptance, to opportunities, to universities, to guilds, to jobs, to high society, to coveted positions. Large numbers of Jews eagerly and willingly paid that price. Finally, many Holocaust survivors have covered their Jewish tracks and raised non-Jewish families that are ignorant of their Jewish roots, because they could not bear the possible consequences of being Jewish. Is the small minority that survives slaughter, persecution, and assimilation sufficient to sustain Judaism? So far, so good. But we cannot take it for granted that this miracle will repeat itself in every generation. There are collateral questions that also need to be examined to shed light on the issue. Is the reason other civilizations disappeared from history that no one tried to suppress them? Were other peoples also strengthened by hostility towards them? The Armenians come to mind. Is the state of Israel kept Jewish by the hostility of its neighbors? In conclusion, a convincing case can be made that anti-Semitism helps preserve Judaism. So in the end, what should we wish for? Perhaps a carefully calibrated balance is the answer. When Jewish identity is looking up, wish for less anti-Semitism. When Jewish identity is looking down, wish for more anti-Semitism, but of the non-lethal variety. Chag Purim Sameach.